Now at 5, unsettling sights and sounds in Ukraine. Sirens. And explosions across the country as Russian troops move in.
Make no mistake, it's a war against Ukraine.
Dozens dead, homes damaged, and widespread panic.
What are your immediate plans?
None. Get to the U.S.
Tonight, President Biden reacts.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
As Russia invades Ukraine.
And here's the latest coming into the CBS 4 newsroom. President Biden announced new strong sanctions on Russia. U.S. stocks tumbled after the attack, and so did global stocks. And Ukraine's health minister announced 57 deaths tied to the invasion.
The invasion is getting worldwide condemnation. U.S. defense officials are calling this the initial phase of a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
We have team coverage tonight. CBS 4's Jacqueline Quinn spoke with people with close ties to Ukraine. But first, we go to Natalie Brand in Washington, D.C. with those latest developments. Natalie?
And Lauren Elliott, President Biden says with the new sanctions announced today against Russia, every asset they have in the U.S. will be frozen. He also announced new import controls to block access to high-tech goods into Russia. And he announced that additional U.S. troops will be headed to Europe as NATO is scheduled to meet tomorrow to discuss next steps.
By land and by air, Russian military forces continue to advance their invasion of Ukraine, which began late Wednesday night. The Pentagon says Russia fired roughly 100 missiles in this initial phase, targeting Ukraine's military infrastructure and highly populated residential areas.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
After meetings with his national security team and then G7 world leaders, President Biden unveiled what he describes as unprecedented sanctions against Russia.
We estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It'll strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It'll degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program.
Meanwhile, NATO says it will activate defense plans to protect its eastern flank. A U.S. defense official says around 7,000 additional U.S. troops will deploy to Germany.
President Biden says he will not send U.S. forces into Ukraine. They are there to shore up NATO, though the U.S. has sent hundreds of millions of dollars in military equipment to help Ukrainians defend their country.
We do not expect anyone to fight for us, but we expect all the help and all the response the West can send to us.
U.S. forces in Poland have set up camps to receive refugees from Ukraine, while loved ones here in the U.S. fear for their safety.
It's painful to see my family being on both sides, being in Ukraine and being in Russia.
Demonstrators took to the streets around the U.S. to stand in solidarity with Ukraine.
And we can also see and hear a demonstration right outside the gates of the White House. Now, Senator Rick Scott, in a new statement this afternoon, said freedom in Europe is under attack, and we must acknowledge that Putin's goal is to seize further control of wealth and power across the continent. He went on to say the U.S. must respond with devastating sanctions and severe consequences that cripple the Russian oligarchy. I've also reached out to Senator Marco Rubio's office for an updated statement from him. He has been tweeting about the crisis since the invasion began late last night. Elliot.
Natalie Brandt, thank you very much for the update from Washington. And right now, let's take a closer look at the timeline of events in Greenwich Mean Time, which is 7 hours ahead of us. 3:59 a.m., the first signs of an invasion, lights go out. 4:50, Putin announces the so-called special military operation, denying plans to occupy Ukrainian territories. Minutes later, at 5:07, the strikes begin. 11:28 a.m., Ukraine's president addresses the nation, comparing Putin to Hitler in World War II. And about an hour later, reports that at least 50 people had been killed, the majority of them soldiers.